Hello and welcome everyone to today's Lunchbox Talk with the North Carolina Botanical Garden. My name is David Michaud. I'm the program coordinator and registrar here. The North Carolina Botanical Garden and the North Carolina Botanical Garden Foundation acknowledge that the story told about the history of the land we steward has been incomplete. Before the Morgans and Masons, these lands were home to multiple tribes and the ancestors of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, who persist locally to this day. We acknowledge the Native people today, including many UNC students, faculty, and staff who still gather, walk, hike, and engage with the habitats and gardens on this land. We recognize that at least one of the adjacent lands we steward, Mason Farm Biological Reserve, was first cleared, cultivated, and worked by Native Americans and later by African enslaved people. We invite you to reflect on our individual and community roles in knowing the whole story about the land we steward. Today, we're so excited to bring you Debbie Crane of the North Carolina chapter of the Nature Conservancy, who will be talking with us about the Venus Flytrap Champions program. For those new to the North Carolina Botanical Garden, we are a conservation garden and a unit of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We would like to thank our Fall 2021 Lunchbox Talk event host, Damon Waite, for supporting our Fall Lunchbox Talk series at the Dogwood level. Lunchbox Talk event hosts provide funds that support program planning, accessibility, and reach of these talks. I'm so pleased to introduce Claire Hsu, my partner in moderation today. Claire is a UNC senior and our education department assistant this year, and she'll be assisting our speaker with Q&A. And without any further ado, I would like to introduce Debbie Crane. Debbie has been the communication director for the North Carolina chapter of the Nature Conservancy since 2008. The culmination of a career that has included journalism and government public information. She has a lifelong obsession with flytraps. She's a native of Western North Carolina, but she took her first job as a reporter in Columbus County in order to live in flytrap country. In addition to inserting flytraps into conversations and publications as often as possible, she also organizes TNC's annual Walk with the Meat Eaters to highlight flytraps and other carnivorous plants. Thank you so much for joining us today, Debbie. I'll stop sharing my screen so you can go ahead and share your wonderful presentation today.
First of all, I want to thank the Botanical Garden for sponsoring this. You know, in the past 21 months, the garden has provided me with such solace, such joy, such peace. And I know a lot of people have really turned to it during the pandemic. And for many decades, I've visited the garden, and I always just get such a feeling of joy when I enter there, and such a feeling of peace when I leave. So I really appreciate being here today, and wish I could be at the Botanical Garden. And I'm feeling hopeful. Things are going to change, and we're going to be doing these things in person, and we're going to get off Zoom, and the world is going to be wonderful. So that said, I'm talking today about the Flytrap Champion program, and I would be remiss if I don't talk about the person who's really behind this program. And I know I saw some people who were commenting. I know they know Julie Moore. Julie is my personal conservation heroine or hero. She is an amazing woman, has spent a lifetime in conservation, is responsible for so many great things that have happened, both in North Carolina and across the country. And she has come back to North Carolina, and well, she has made flytraps her cause. She's also working in a couple of other things as well, but she has pretty much single-handedly created this Flytrap Champions program. But when she came to me to help her, she knew she was coming to somebody who loves flytraps. As David mentioned, when I got out of Carolina, I had a couple of job offers. I was a radio, television, motion picture major, and I wanted to be a radio reporter, which I was for a few years. And I took this job with Farm Radio WKSM in Columbus County, North Carolina. And people were like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, it's a beginning job no matter where I'm going, but at least here I'll be near flytraps. And I spent a lot of time at the Green Swamp, which, by the way, didn't look nearly as beautiful then as it does now. The Nature Conservancy acquired it a few years before I started visiting there, and nobody was burning it. You actually had to look pretty hard to find the flytraps then, but now you can find them easily. And I came to my flytrap obsession early in my life when my parents would take me to Myrtle Beach, when all the other little kids were wanting hermit crabs or sand dollars or seashells. I just wanted flytraps. And in that era, you could find flytraps being sold out of the back of trucks along Highway 17 and gift shops. And I will acknowledge now what I didn't know then. It is likely those flytraps were stolen, poached, probably from the Green Swamp. Terrible thing, but it did spark my lifelong obsession with these wonderful plants. I'm not alone. Look at this. If you see here, this is this wonderful costume that PetSmart was selling earlier this year, a flytrap costume, right up there with the Marvel and the Superman costumes. They were peddling this costume. And I can tell you that it actually went out, they actually sold out of them, the small sizes, because I wanted to get one for my dog, who's very small, and my cat, and they only had the large ones left. So it was extremely popular with lots of people. And that's because fly traps are just such amazing things and people just adore them. And of course, there's Little Shop of Horrors, which, well, you know, people think Audrey is people, when we go to when we do the walk with the meat eaters, we have a few people who are real disappointed because they expect to see Audrey out there in the green swamp. Of course, she's not there, but they get over that really quickly because they understand it's such an amazing creature. And it isn't just pop culture. This is the Oxford Botanical Gardens Carnivorous Plant Room. And I'm sure you plant people and people who love botanical gardens know the world over, you almost always find a carnivorous plant section, and it almost always has a Venus flytrap in it. When I go to a botanical garden, my first question at the very beginning is, do you have flytraps? And if so, where are they? And I go there and I just stand there in awe that I could be in like Germany or Switzerland, New Zealand, Australia. I've been in botanical gardens and all those places, and flytraps were there. And then I'm like, wow, it has international acclaim, and it only really occurs naturally in this tiny place of the universe in North Carolina and South Carolina. And sometimes I insist on telling random strangers that. My husband hates when I do that, especially in countries where I don't speak the language and they just think there's some crazy English-speaking lady warbling at them. But you know, an obsession is an obsession. I could be obsessed with far worse things. But with all the love for flytraps, their range is narrowing. The map you see here, if you look at that kind of mauve color there, that is the original flytrap natural range. That included 18 counties in North Carolina and 3 in South Carolina. And that has shrunk now. It only exists now in 11 counties in North Carolina, 1 in South Carolina. Very sad. And just as an update, I'm sure many of you know this already, but earlier this year, North Carolina listed the flytrap as threatened. And the Fish and Wildlife Service is now reviewing the flytrap status to determine whether flytraps should be listed under the Endangered Species Act. We don't expect anything on that until at least 2023. One of the questions I used to always get from as long as I've worked with the Nature Conservatives is, well, how many flytraps are there? And there was a problem because early on when I was at the Conservancy, there was a story done. All you people, I had nothing to do with it. I was not the problem here. We don't really know exactly how it happened, but there were a couple of pretty well-known publications that gave some really dubious numbers for the number of flytraps that exist in the wild. One of them gave a number as low as 25,000 plants. We knew that was not accurate because you can go to the green swamp and you can find 25,000 plants there fairly easily. So we knew that wasn't accurate. But when I would try to get people to change that number, they would say, well, give me the accurate number. And I'd say, well, I don't really have one. But thanks to what I think is really the premier program in state government, the Natural Heritage Program, we now have a good number to give people. Natural Heritage conducted a survey back in 2019 and 2020, and they found a minimum of 879, 167 minimum population projected, and they did find flytraps in 69 locations. And one of those locations was the green swamp. That's those five flytraps you see there from there. Another one was another one of our preserves, which isn't open to the public, which is Myrtle Head Savanna Preserve. And you do see these big clumps there at Myrtle Head Savanna. But, you know, the green swamp is a huge area. So you have these big populations. You have Sunny Point Marine Ocean Terminal, or we sometimes call it Military Ocean Terminal, Sunny Point, Matsu. But then there's places where you have little populations of flytraps. Some of these 69 sites were in people's backyards, or they on the edge of a golf course. And unlike a lot of rare species, Venus flytrap range has always been small. Unfortunately, it is a small range in a really fast-growing part of the country. Now, I will apologize ahead of time if anybody here lives in this subdivision, which is in New Bern, North Carolina, in Craven County. I apologize. I'm sure it's a lovely place to live. But for those of us who know about longleaf and love longleaf, And of course, flytrap co-occurs with longleaf in North Carolina. If you travel around the Southeast, which I've been doing a lot of during the pandemic, I'm sitting right now, by the way, in Hillsboro in my trailer, my Airstream trailer, but we've been traveling around. I've been working virtually. And I can't tell you, I gave up counting at 10. The number of subdivisions and strip malls I saw in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, that were named after longleaf pine. And well, they're recognizing longleaf pine. I guess that's good, but they're destroying the habitat and doing so often. You change the hydrology. If you change the hydrology, you lose a lot of things, especially those things on the ground like Venus flytraps. And you really stymie an important land management tool, the most important one we have for both longleaf and Venus flytraps, which is fire. You can't burn a subdivision readily. It's very difficult to, with quarter-acre lots, houses, all the stuff that people have there. It's very important, and fire is a major component, major management tool that we use. This picture here was taken in May of 2019, or actually it was the spring of 2019, earlier spring, in the Green Swamp Preserve. And that was just a magnificent year for burning, an amazing year for burning. And that burning paid off really well for flytraps. These pictures were taken in May of 2020 at our Green Swamp Preserve. And sadly, that was during the pandemic. So that was even when you weren't supposed to be traveling from county to county. So most people couldn't see the flytraps, and we had to cancel our annual walk with the meat eaters, which broke my heart because this would have been the best year for seeing them because they were so amazing. These pictures were taken by one of our staff who lives near there. If you look there, with the pitcher plants there, and that's a bunch of flytrap blooms in the front. And this was how the whole preserve looked, just big clumps of flytrap blooms everywhere. For those of you who don't know flytraps are easiest to see around mid-May, around that time of year, when they're in bloom, because those little white flowers tip you off to them. But if you look at this drone video here, which is pretty incredible, you can see, if you look carefully, there's a lot of little white, and this drone video is from about 40 feet up in the air. If you see, there's a lot of little white dots in there. Those are all clusters of flytrap blooms. So it was just an amazing time for flytraps. And we've been burning. One of the things that's been, socially, you want to talk about social distancing, burning is one of those things where it's really easy to social distance. So we had a little glitch last year in 2020 where we lost a little bit of burn time, but we've been up and burning for quite a while now. And I'm really hoping that when we do our walk with the meat eaters this year, which is for our members, so if you join the Conservancy, we'll let you know about it, that we'll have lots of flytraps to show people. Back when I first joined the Nature Conservancy, this was the first media event that I organized, and it was in conjunction with the Botanical Garden. And this is some of our volunteers. In fact, that's our former board chair and his wife. And what they're doing there is they are replanting, this was in the early spring of 2009, they're replanting flytraps and carnivorous plants that had been poached from the Green Swamp Preserve. The Botanical Garden had taken those poached plants, and for those of you who don't know a lot about the way they poach flytraps, they go in and they dig up the flytrap or the pitcher plant. They usually do both of them at the same time. And they basically just snip off everything but the root bulb. And then they just put that in a burlap sack, and you can fit literally 600, 700 bulbs in a burlap sack easily and more. And then they tote them out of the green swamp. This particular guy got caught, and the Botanical Garden said, send us your flytraps. And they nursed them back to good health. And we put them back in the ground, and I'm sure some of their offspring are thriving to this day. Like a lot of people, this is how I felt flytrap poachers should be punished. Here's Audrey eating somebody in Little Shop of Horrors. But I have to tell you, over time, my feelings about this and some of my colleagues at the conservancies have changed, and I know this may be a little controversial. Fly trapping has become a felony in North Carolina, but there's a lot of nuance there, and I know Damon Waite certainly shares this. I've seen him talk, or seen some articles he sent out about this. There's a lot of nuance around poaching. So the poaching law applies directly to the people who go in and do what I told you. And yes, what they're doing is wrong. I'm not denying that, but if you know the poachers, and I've actually talked with a couple and I've met a couple and read about some, and my colleagues know more. They're local people of limited means. These people aren't getting rich. They aren't even getting by with this flytrap poaching. What we would like to see is a bigger focus on who the heck is driving this trade. Somebody is buying these fly traps from these folks, and then they're being used for something. And there really needs to be a stronger focus on that middle person and the end user. There are a couple of ideas out there about the people who are driving this trade. One of them are these, I imagine them as little weird people sitting in their mother's basement. But anyway, they're people who want to get lots of different variations of fly traps. They're sort of there's carnivorous plant collectors. And we know they're out there. There are whole books devoted to this stuff. So fly traps are, yes, they're only one plant, but they can look very different. And some of them are really red, some are really bright green, some have longer flat traps, some a little bit, some are really big and juicy, some are small, and some are almost jello. And there are people out there who would like to possess every one of those kinds of fly traps. So we suspect some of that is driving the fly trap poaching. And then if you Google fly traps, you see what I call our snake oil salesmen. I'm not going to say they are pharmaceutical industry or medical people. These are people who claim that wild fly trap oil, which I don't even know what the heck that is, but they claim that it can solve everything from cancer to helping you quit smoking, those kinds of things. So those are some of the ideas. We hope people will pursue more research on that. We would certainly like to pursue research on who the end user is. But I can assure you that if you buy a fly trap at like a Lowe's or a Home Depot or a Walmart, those are actually being cultivated in, you can use, they're being cloned using tissue culture in a greenhouse. They're totally legal. So you're not like me when I was a kid purchasing those fly traps down at Myrtle Beach. But I come back to habitat conversion. When reporters call me, they always start out. I had a reporter call from LA last week, and he was wanting to come to North Carolina to do a fly trap story, and he started out with poaching. And I said, poaching, yes, bad, it is a problem. But the biggest problem is habitat conversion, and that habitat conversion leads to our inability to manage with fire. That's our biggest issues. And I will give you this. I don't want to upset if there's somebody here from Brunswick County government or the economic development. I understand that people need to make a living. I lived in Brunswick County for a couple of years, and I lived there back before it was a really hopping place. So I know how people really want to make a living. And I have to admit, full disclosure, my parents were real estate salesmen in the mountains. So I understand development and I know it happens. But if you see this ad, it's global access without the headache. It's encouraging people to come where they're already playing, come work where you play in Brunswick County. And if you can't read this, it says Brunswick County, North Carolina is located between historic Wilmington, North Carolina and lively Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the second fastest growing county in North Carolina. Brunswick County experienced a growth rate of 47% since 2000. So yes, it's growing and development is occurring, but it needs to happen in the right place because that is really what's hurting fly traps. That and fire suppression is often related to the development. Now, I got a question for y'all. We're going to put up a poll here. These are some pictures from our green swamp. I need to start the poll. I can start it. Well, I think maybe Claire will have to start it. But anyway, we're going to put up a poll now. To see where you have encountered, if you've encountered fly traps, how many of you have seen them in the wild? And while you're doing your poll, I will tell you that these pictures are from our Green Swamp Preserve. And that picture there of the little fly trap was about a month after a burn. I just put that in there to show people that burning is wonderful for fly traps. And the picture, the other magnificent picture there is fly traps in bloom. Those are just incredible. And this is a real picture, by the way. The only thing, it's really the really great lens, and the photographer was lying down when he took it. And for those who have not seen fly traps in the wild, when you see fly traps in the wild, the easiest time is in May when they're in bloom, because in general, fly traps are really, really tiny. But they shoot up this little green stem, which you can see in this picture, which goes about 6 to 8 inches in the air, and the little fly trap bloom is on the top there. And the poll here says that Oh, 68% of you have seen fly traps in the wild. 10 of you haven't. And I will tell you that if you haven't seen them, please visit our Green Swamp Preserve, because that's a great place to see it. And I can give you details if you want to know how to get there. So we can manage our fly traps through burning. So can Sunny Point, so can Camp Lejeune, so can the State Park System, the Wildlife Resources Commission. But the Natural Heritage Survey found, and for some reason, I'm hanging up here. Claire, you may have to, or David, you may have to advance my slides. For some reason, I'm now hung up here.
Give me 1 second.
Preview. Okay, so the Natural Heritage Site, we found lots, or they found lots of fly traps on private lands, and they also found fly traps that weren't being managed well. And that's where came the idea that I told you about. The Venus Flytrap Champions program came into play. Now, it was based on another program, which has been in North Carolina for about 4 years. Was developed by the North Carolina Longleaf Coalition, and it's the North Carolina Longleaf Honor Roll. Here is an invite to an event that was held recently honoring the landowners who are managing their flytrap habitat well. You get a sign to put on your property that says you're a member of the honor roll, so that encourages your neighbors and people in your community to manage their longleaf well. And by the way, I don't know if anybody here knows this, but this was for our former conservation director, Rick Studham, and his wife, Nancy. They were recognized just a few weeks ago for doing such an incredible job on their flytrap, on their longleaf habitat. So if we go to the next slide. The first thing, well, the slide before that one, yeah, that one. The first thing that we wanted to do as we developed the program was to start reaching out to people all across the region. And we put together this brochure. If you would like copies at the end, I'll give you contact information and we can send them to you. We would love for people to distribute these on our behalf. Fly traps, this is written in a very, Julie and I developed this, and I kept saying, Julie, you know, she kept saying, boy, this is written at a really basic level. I said, well, a lot of the people, this is aimed at people who don't know fly traps. It's aimed at people who may not realize what they have in their backyard. So it's written for those folks, not for botanical folks. And we put it together. We've printed up lots of copies, and Julie herself has spent a lot of time distributing, but so have all the conservation partners. And I know this is working and it's getting out there, because a few weeks ago, our TNC's government relations director was over at the legislature, and a legislator flagged him down and handed this brochure and said, this is an amazing thing. He was a guy from that region where fly traps occur. He was, you know, I want to get this out to people. Thank you. You know, did TNC have something to do with this? And because the pictures, a lot of them came from TNC, and of course we did. I said, of course we did, and we're proud to be a sponsor of the Longleaf Champion program. If you'll go to the next slide. So it is clear that many landowners just don't know what they have on their land. A guy named Daniel Hannon, he was crucial. He worked with the Natural Heritage Program on the longleaf survey, the fly trap survey I talked about earlier. He's now a colleague of mine, and he works in our Sandhills office. And he is working on another survey now called the Longleaf Ecosystem Survey, or we call them LEO surveys. And in that survey, he's just completed and compiling the data now, but it's looking at longleaf on private property across the state where it is likely to occur. So he can go, sometimes he can just do it from the road. If a landowner isn't willing to have him come on their property, he just stands on the road and kind of looks and says, well, you know, here's what I think this longleaf is like on this property. But most of the landowners have been very welcoming and invited him onto their property. And one of those was a private property owner in Pender County, North Carolina, down on the coast. And when Daniel's an amazing fellow, young guy, really fit, wonderful, and he just bushwhacks through this property like crazy. He found a couple of hundred fly traps that hadn't been identified through the survey I just told you about, the Natural Heritage Survey, on a private property in Pender County. And here's a picture of those fly traps, and as you can see, they're just lovely. So next slide, please. So Johnny, slide before that, sorry. Before that, the other way.
Sorry, I've never done this remote access before. Oh gosh. I know they're only going forward now.
Now, one more back. Okay.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Nope, not a problem. So he contacted, Daniel contacted the private landowner there and said, hey, can I, tell other folks who are botanical folks about this plant's existence on your property, and can we do some things to help ensure that it survives there? And they said yes. And one of those things was Daniel then contacted Johnny Randall. For those of you who know the Botanical Garden, Johnny is a wonderful integral part of the Botanical Garden, also another conservation hero of mine. And Johnny went down in July, this past July, to this property, and he took me with him. And the idea that he was doing then was looking for seeds. We went after these little blooms had gone into seed. And Johnny is trying to collect seeds from every flytrap population that exists, including those in South Carolina. And he stores them back at the Botanical Garden for perpetuity. And if something were to happen that wiped out, say, this flytrap population on this property, then Johnny and others could use those seeds to come back and restore the population on the property. And flytrap seeding, I tell you, it was a really hot day. Johnny's wearing shorts there. It was a really, really hot day. It's heat in this kind of territory can get really bad in July, and it was a hot, hot, hot day. We were out there collecting these seeds, and if you've done that, you know that the flytrap seeds, they're full of tannin. So when you're collecting seeds, they're smaller than a sesame seed. You have to pinch them off, and my fingers got really, really black. And Johnny said that was the order of the black thumb. He made me feel good about that, which I think is wonderful. If we go to the next slide. And as a result of Johnny being so gracious and taking me along on this visit, we were able to do some more publicity about flytrap champions and about flytraps in general. So the Nature Conservancy is, I got to put a plug in, it's the world's largest conservation nonprofit, and they're different business units. North Carolina is one of those. Each state has a business unit. There's many international business units. They have a magazine they publish called Nature Magazine, which reaches more than 1 million people. And I wrote this article for that magazine. It was just published this past week, Preserving the Plant That Bites. And it was about working with Johnny that day to save these wonderful, wonderful plant seeds in case that particular population is wiped out. And that's the kind of publicity that we're trying to get for flytrap champions and for flytraps. Next slide. And here's more publicity. So Julie Moore, who has more energy than any human being I've ever met, has been really pursuing every possible angle. And she went to Orton Foundation, which of course is connected to the wonderful Orton land in Brunswick County, which they manage amazingly well. They have an amazing burn crew, an amazing land manager. And the person you see there in the plaid shirt talking and being recorded is a guy named Dylan Epp, who is their land manager, he was talking that day about good land management for plants, for fly traps, and how it benefits all the other plants and animals. Because that longleaf system, good land management just benefits the whole ecosystem. And we did this, they did this wonderful video. You could see the equipment they were using. This is not me shooting with my iPhone and doing some really, terrible editing back on my computer. This is a really high-end product that the Orton Foundation did for us. And it's on the website that I'll show you at the end. I won't show you the video, but you'll have the website address. You can go look at it yourself. And Julie is spending a lot of time. I'll call her for various reasons, and she'll be down somewhere in flytrap land, and she's spending a whole lot of time down there going out and meeting with private property owners, meeting with other flytrap obsessives. I was honored. She took me down to meet with some fellow female flytrap obsessives back in July, or I guess it was actually in August. We had a wonderful time, got to see some flytraps, got to talk to people who love them as much as we do, and how we could make the Flytrap Champion program even bigger, especially in Brunswick County, where there's a lot of interest. This is where these ladies were from. And of course, Julie had to take that time. We ate lunch at a bakery shop, and she had to take the time to try to get them to create a flytrap cookie. I'm convinced, knowing Julie, next time I go back, there will be a flytrap cookie, because she won't let them along until they develop one. If you go to the next slide. So now we've started awarding people people and organizations flytrap champion recognition. And this is for, obviously, we're shooting for private individuals. We're also starting out with, because a lot of private individuals, the program is kind of twofold. We want to get private individuals to recognize what they have, manage it properly. In the meantime, some of our first recipients are going to be organizations that are already doing really good management, leading by their management. And the first one of those was the Horry County Conservation Foundation. Now, this is a really interesting reason they got recognized. Nobody knew about this particular group of fly traps. So in Horry County, which if you're not North Carolina, if you don't know North Carolina, Horry County is it's the first county south of Brunswick County in North Carolina. It's where Myrtle Beach is. But we thought that in fact the site had been, that the plants had gone missing there, but they haven't. And in fact, they were being very well managed. There was a woman on one of Julie's seminars who reached out and said, hey, I think you probably don't know this, but there are actually two sites. If you saw the slide I showed earlier, they're both in Horry County, but there's actually two sites of fly traps in Horry County. And there's this one that we didn't know about because we thought they were gone. And the reason I show you this kind of interesting slide here is fly traps in South Carolina appear to be in different places than fly traps in North Carolina. So in North Carolina, you're going to find fly traps in longleaf, wet longleaf savannas, like the picture you see there. But in South Carolina, they're occurring on Carolina bays, on the edges of Carolina bays. And of course, I'm talking to a lot of plant folk here, so I'm sure most people know this, but Carolina bays get the name bay because of the bay plants growing on them. And then there's really interesting phenomenon that there are a lot of different theories out there, but you can find them along the East Coast. They're isolated wetlands. They have these sort of natural shallow depressions, largely fed by rain and some groundwater. And they're really interesting. If you see like the satellite map, you'll see they occur in general, they're elliptical and they're northwest to southeast, the way they orient. So I just had to throw that up there because I find Carolina bays fascinating. I think it's very cool that that's where the fly traps in South Carolina are occurring. Next slide, please. And then our second recipient, who we haven't been able to give the Horry County people their plaque yet, but we're going to. Julie and I are going to be traveling down there because I want to go with her. But Julie traveled and managed to give Michael Fuller his plaque in October. And Michael is a wonderful man. He's the forester at the Military Ocean Terminal at Sunny Point, Matsu is what it's called. And he was recognized for, he's been doing some really aggressive burning on Matsu that is benefiting both the fly traps and obviously the red-cockaded woodpecker, along with all the other cool things that you find in wet savannas. And to tell you how cool those fly traps are, and you have to get special security clearance, by the way, to see them. Julie had to go through some security stuff to go there. I was there a few years ago with one of our folks as well. We had to go through some security. They do have amazing fly traps there. So that picture you're seeing there, somebody holding a fly trap, if you know fly traps, that's a really big fly trap. It's also a really pretty red, juicy fly trap because the penny there gives you some idea about the size. And if you know fly traps are usually much smaller than that. We're thinking about trying to kind of pit landowner against landowner to see where we can find the biggest fly traps. I still think they're at Holly Shelter Game Lands, which is managed by the Wildlife Resources Commission, because that's where I've seen the biggest groups of them. But we're mulling around a lot of different ways. Next slide. We're mulling around a lot of different ways to get more attention on fly traps, which is coming close to the end of my formal presentation here today. We would love your assistance. You may have ideas about publicity. You may have ideas about things you can personally do to benefit the species. If you look at sites here, you can go to the website, which is amazing, venusflytrapchampions.org. You can contact Julie at her email address, smilaxnc@gmail.com, or you can contact me, dcrane@tnc.org, or my cell phone, 919-619-8613. And we'll be glad to talk with you because we would love to have all the help we can get, because these are amazing plants and they need everything they can get.
I do just want to thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing this important presentation.
And thank you. And I just want to tell people, you want a good place to buy fly traps is, of course, the Botanical Gardens, which is an amazing place. And it's a good place to get your native plants. I just said goodbye to my beauty berry for the season. He'll be coming back next year. Johnny sold me that one a few years back. So thank you all for hosting this, and please do contact me if you have anything to talk about fly traps or Nature Conservancy. I love talking to people. So thank you very much.
Thanks again, and thank you all for joining us. If you're not currently a member, we do hope you will consider becoming one, as membership is critical to our mission. And thank you all once again for attending. We hope to see you at the garden or at Green Swamp soon.